A wealthy woman demanded I give up my first-class seat because richer people deserve better spots. When I refused, she screamed, "Do you even know who I am?" The flight attendant smirked as she held up a rebooking notice and said, "Then you'll love enjoying your new seat, at the back of the plane." Alright, so this happened a few months ago. I wasn't even planning to share it, but after telling a few friends, they convinced me that this was some of the best real-life karma they had ever heard. So, here I am. For context, I've worked hard to get where I am. Grew up in a small town, worked my way through college, and eventually built a career that lets me afford a few luxuries. Nothing crazy, but once in a while, I like to treat myself. This was one of those times. I was flying New York, JFK, to London, Heathrow, for a work trip. Long flight, overnight, and I wasn't about to spend 7 hours crammed in economy. So, I splurged and got myself a first-class seat, a reward for years of working my ass off. I got to the airport early, checked in, and made my way through security with no issue. I had time to kill, so I headed to the first-class lounge to relax before the flight. That's where I first saw her. She was hard to miss. A woman in her late 50s, dressed in a white tailored pantsuit, oversized sunglasses indoors, and dripping in gold jewelry. She carried herself like she owned the place. Even in the lounge, she was bossing people around, snapping at staff, complaining about the champagne selection, and looking at everyone like they were beneath her. I figured she was just one of those people who lives to be difficult. Didn't think much of it. I should have known she'd be trouble. They called first-class boarding, and I made my way to my seat, 2A, a window seat, perfect for an overnight flight. The second I settled in, I pulled out my Kindle and got comfortable. That's when she appeared. She stopped right next to my seat, looking me up and down like I had just wandered in from coach by mistake. Then she spoke. "Excuse me, I believe you're in my seat." I looked up, confused. 2A, right? I double-checked my ticket. Yes, but I always sit here. There must be a mix-up. Her tone was sharp, not like someone who genuinely thought there was a mistake. More like someone who was used to getting what she wanted. I lifted my ticket slightly so she could see it. "No mistake. This is my seat." She scoffed. "There is no way you belong here." At first, I thought I misheard her. "Excuse me?" She didn't even blink. "First class isn't for people like you." That's when it clicked. I was dressed nice, slacks, a button-down, even a blazer, but I didn't look like her kind of rich. Maybe she expected a hedge fund manager, not some regular guy who just happened to be able to afford first class. She turned her attention to the flight attendant, who had been standing nearby, watching. "I need you to move him. This is my seat." The flight attendant, a professional-looking woman in her late 40s, didn't even flinch. "May I see your boarding pass, ma'am?" The woman huffed and handed it over. The attendant glanced at it, then handed it back. "Ma'am, your seat is 3D. An aisle seat, just behind him." She acted like she had just been told to sit in the cargo hold. "I don't sit in aisles. I always have a window seat." The attendant smiled politely. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but your assigned seat is 3D. Now, any normal person would have just taken their damn seat. Not this woman." She crossed her arms and glared at me. "Switch with me." No. I didn't even pretend to consider it. I paid for my seat. I wasn't about to move just because she thought she was more important. Her face twisted like I had just told her to sit in the lavatory. "Are you serious?" "Very." She turned back to the flight attendant, her voice climbing in pitch. "Do you know how much I spend on flights with this airline? I'm a valued customer. You should be accommodating me, not him." The flight attendant kept her customer service smile but didn't budge. "Ma'am, your seat is in first class. You still have a premium experience." "That's not the point," she snapped. "I always get my window seat. I've been flying this airline for 20 years. This is unacceptable." The flight attendant nodded calmly. "I understand your frustration, ma'am, but this gentleman is in his assigned seat. We cannot force him to move." Then it happened. Her face turned red. She clenched her fists. Then she screeched, "Do you even know who I am?" First-class passengers turned their heads. Businessmen, honeymooners, even a woman across the aisle who had been pretending to read a magazine stopped to watch the show. The flight attendant, still perfectly calm, responded without missing a beat. "I do, ma'am. That's why I know your seat is in 3D. I swear I saw the veins in her neck bulge. I will have your job for this. The flight attendant just smiled. Let's not escalate the situation, ma'am. The rich woman huffed like a raging bull and turned back to me. Move. Now. Not happening. You are ruining my flight. Not my problem. She looked ready to explode. Then came the final death blow. The flight attendant, still smiling, said, "Ma'am, if you are unable to take your assigned seat, we may have to discuss alternative seating arrangements." Rich lady froze. What do you mean? The flight attendant pulled out a small rebooking slip and held it up. I mean, if you continue to disrupt the boarding process, we may need to move you to another section of the plane. If first class is not meeting your needs, we do have availability in economy. You could have heard a pin drop. The entire cabin was watching. Her face went pale. Then, like a switch flipped, she lost it. You can't do this to me, she shrieked. The flight attendant simply raised an eyebrow. Ma'am, I need you to either take your assigned seat, or we will have to involve security. And that's where things took a turn. Silence. You could feel the tension hanging in the air. The woman's face was a mix of rage and disbelief. It was like nobody had ever dared to tell her no before. Her mouth opened and closed a few times, like she was trying to figure out whether to keep fighting or give in. Then she made the worst possible decision. She turned to the flight attendant, jabbed a perfectly manicured finger in her face, and said, "You're going to regret this. I'll have you fired before this plane even lands." The flight attendant, still calm as ever, tilted her head slightly. "Ma'am, please lower your voice, or we will have to escort you off the plane." And just like that, security appeared. 2 uniformed airport officers had stepped onto the plane, standing near the entrance. They weren't moving yet, but they were watching. Waiting. The rich woman saw them too. Her posture stiffened. She wasn't stupid, she knew if she pushed this any further, she could be removed from the flight entirely. She took a deep breath, turned back to me, and hissed, "You will regret this." I didn't respond. What was there to say? The flight attendant, clearly having had enough, gestured toward seat 3D, her actual seat. "Ma'am, please take your seat so we can depart on time." For a second, I thought she was going to fight back again. But then, without another word, she spun on her heel and stomped toward 3D. The moment she sat down, first class relaxed. Conversations picked up again, people went back to their pre-flight routines, and the flight attendants continued their checks. For a while, everything seemed fine. I settled into my seat, put in my noise-canceling headphones, and figured that was the end of it. Maybe she'd glare at me a few times during the flight, but whatever. I had one. Or so I thought. The plane took off smoothly. First-class service started quickly. Warm towels, drinks, gourmet meals. I was halfway through my glass of red wine, finally relaxed, when I felt it. A sharp jab against the back of my seat. At first, I thought it was an accident. Maybe she adjusted her bag and bumped my chair. But then it happened again. Harder. I turned my head slightly. She was staring straight ahead, pretending nothing was happening. I let it go. I wasn't going to engage with someone acting like a child. 5 minutes passed. Then, another jab. This time, with force. I turned fully around and locked eyes with her. "Is there a problem?" She raised an eyebrow, acting completely innocent. "Oh, is my footrest bothering you?" Footrest? I glanced down. She had her foot, her actual foot, pressed against the back of my seat, pushing forward just enough to be annoying but not enough to get caught by the flight attendants. This woman was playing games. I exhaled slowly and turned back around. Fine. If she wanted to act like a child, she could enjoy the turbulence when the seat in front of her moved back. Without a word, I fully reclined my seat. Thump. She gasped loudly like she had just been shot. "You did that on purpose." I didn't answer. I just took a sip of my wine. At this point, she was seething. I could feel her glare burning into the back of my head. A few minutes passed, and I thought maybe she'd give up. Nope. Suddenly, a strong smell filled the air. I wrinkled my nose. Perfume. Heavy, overpowering perfume. I turned my head slightly and saw her, holding a small glass bottle, spritzing it into the air like she was trying to fumigate the cabin. Passengers nearby started coughing. A man a few seats over muttered, "What the hell?" A flight attendant walked over quickly. Ma'am, I need you to stop spraying that immediately. The woman snapped. It's my perfume. I always use it on flights. This cabin smells awful. Ma'am, some passengers may be sensitive to strong fragrances. Please put it away. She huffed but shoved the bottle back into her ridiculously overpriced designer handbag. The flight attendant walked away, but I knew this wasn't over. This woman wasn't done. I just didn't expect how far she was willing to go. The meal service ended. Lights dimmed. People started settling in for the long flight. Then, just as I was about to doze off, she leaned forward and whispered something. You don't belong here. And when we land, I'm going to make sure you regret ever sitting in that seat. At first, I almost laughed. What was she going to do? Have me blacklisted from first class? But then, she added, I know people. You have no idea who you just pissed off. Something about the way she said it made my stomach tighten slightly. She wasn't just being dramatic. She actually believed she had power, real power. I turned my head just enough to look at her. She was smiling now, smug and self-satisfied. She leaned back, adjusting the diamond-studded bracelet on her wrist, and pulled out her phone. Now, normally, phones should be in airplane mode by this point. But she was typing. Fast. Like she was sending some very important message. I wasn't paranoid, but something about it felt off. Who was she texting? What exactly did she mean by, you'll regret this? I should have ignored it. I should have just assumed she was bluffing. But something told me this woman wasn't done ruining my night. And unfortunately, I was right. I tried to ignore her, but something about the way she was smiling, like she knew something I didn't, kept nagging at me. I couldn't see exactly what she was doing on her phone, but she was typing fast, pausing, then typing again. Who was she texting at 40,000 feet in the air? First-class Wi-Fi was available, but still, who was so important that she needed to send messages in the middle of a tantrum? Then she did something that made my stomach tighten. She glanced at me out of the corner of her eye, smirked, then lifted her phone slightly. Just enough for me to see the screen. There it was. A text conversation with someone named Martin, security. My gut said this was not good. The last message she had sent. Handle him at Heathrow. Now, I'm not the kind of person who gets scared easily, but something about this felt off. I didn't know who Martin was. Could be a bluff, sure. But something told me this woman was the type of person who actually had connections. Maybe she was texting some low-level security guy she knew at the airport. Maybe she was making up a scene to get me escorted off the plane. Either way, I wasn't about to sit there and just hope she was bluffing. I turned slightly and spotted the same flight attendant who had handled her tantrum earlier. She was near the galley, speaking with another crew member. I waited for a moment, then got up and walked over to her. She noticed me right away. Everything okay, sir? I kept my voice low. Not sure. The woman in 3D just sent a message saying someone should handle me at Heathrow. I don't know what that means, but I figured I should let you know. The flight attendant's eyebrows lifted. She glanced over at the woman, who was pretending to be deeply interested in her in-flight menu. She's already been disruptive. If she's making threats, that's serious. She paused for a second, thinking. Then, without another word, she walked straight toward the cockpit. I sat back down. A few minutes later, the head flight attendant, a middle-aged man with an authoritative presence, walked down the aisle and stopped at seat 3D. Ma'am, I need to speak with you privately. The woman stiffened. About what? Please step into the galley. She huffed like she was being completely inconvenienced but stood up and followed him. As she disappeared behind the curtain, the businessman across the aisle turned to me. What's going on? I gave a small shrug. Not sure, but I think she might be in trouble. He smirked. About time. 15 minutes passed. Then 20. I didn't hear anything, but the tension in the air was obvious. A few flight attendants whispered near the galley. Something was happening. Then, the curtain opened. The rich woman stormed out. She was pale. Her perfect posture was gone. She clutched her designer bag with both hands, her lips pressed together so tightly they looked bloodless. She didn't say a word as she slumped into her seat. Then I noticed her phone was gone. I glanced at a flight attendant walking by and raised an eyebrow. She gave me a slight, knowing smile. They took her phone. What did they find? I didn't know what exactly happened in that galley, but whatever was on that phone was enough to make her panic. The rest of the flight was uneventful, at least on the surface. The woman didn't say a word. Didn't kick my seat. Didn't spray perfume. She just sat there, clutching her $5,000 handbag like it was the only thing keeping her sane. But I wasn't stupid. I could feel it. This wasn't over. Not yet. The wheels touched down at Heathrow. People started gathering their belongings, stretching, checking their phones. I stood up, grabbed my carry-on, and felt a wave of relief. I was off this flight. But as I turned toward the exit, I saw them. 2 security officers. Waiting. Not for her. For me. I stepped off the plane, my body still tense from the long flight. The moment I entered Heathrow's jet bridge, I spotted them. 2 airport security officers. Standing near the terminal entrance. Waiting. And they weren't looking at the woman from 3D. They were looking at me. At first, I thought, this has to be a mistake. Maybe they were there for someone else. Maybe they were just patrolling. But then one of them, a tall guy with a thick British accent, stepped forward and blocked my path. "Sir, we need you to come with us." Passengers behind me stopped walking. Conversations died down. People were watching. I barely had time to react before the rich woman brushed past me, her handbag clutched tight against her chest, and gave me a triumphant, smug little smirk. Like she had won. And that's when I knew. She set me up. "Excuse me," I said, my voice even. "What's going on?" The second officer, a woman with sharp eyes, held up a clipboard. "We received a report of a disruptive passenger matching your description. We need to ask you some questions." The rich woman kept walking, heels clicking on the tile, disappearing into the crowd. I stared at the officers. "You're joking, right?" "I wasn't disruptive," she was. The tall officer sighed. "That's not the report we received." I felt a sharp wave of anger rise up my throat. I could already guess what had happened. She had texted her little Martin contact, told them some exaggerated story about how I was harassing her on the plane, maybe even making her feel unsafe. And now here I was, being treated like the problem. I wasn't about to let that happen. Before I could argue, a voice cut through the tension. "I'd like to clarify something." I turned, and saw the flight attendant from earlier. She walked up to security, calm and professional. "I was on this flight, and I can tell you right now that this gentleman was not the problem." The security officers exchanged glances. "And who was?" She folded her arms. "The woman who reported him. She was the one causing a disturbance. I personally had to intervene multiple times. The pilot was made aware as well." The officers frowned. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely." A beat passed. Then, the tall officer let out a deep sigh and looked at me. "Apologies, sir. It appears there's been a misunderstanding." At that moment, I should have let it go. I had won. The officers knew I wasn't the problem. I could have just walked away, shaken it off, let karma do its thing. But I didn't. Because I saw her. The woman from 3D was standing by baggage claim, looking at me from a distance. And she was laughing. Like this had all been some fun little game to her. Something inside me snapped. I turned back to security. "Actually, I'd like to report something too." The officers looked at me, surprised. I pointed straight at her. "That woman. She made threats against me during the flight. She also attempted to tamper with my seat and use strong fragrances that affected other passengers. If you're investigating disruptive behavior, you should start with her." The officers followed my gaze and locked onto her. The second one, the woman, spoke into her radio. Confirming, "Does passenger 3D require further questioning?" Silence. Then a crackle of response. "Affirmative. Have her remain at the terminal." A moment later, one of the security officers started walking toward her. The second she realized what was happening, her smirk disappeared. She actually took a step back, like she could somehow escape this. "What's this about?" she demanded, her voice sharp. The security officer's expression was unreadable. "Ma'am, we need to ask you a few questions about your conduct on the flight." She turned red. "This is ridiculous. I am a valued customer. I will have your job for this." And then, in the middle of Heathrow's baggage claim, she made the biggest mistake of all. She lost it. Do you even know who I am? I thought security might try to calm her down. Instead, the flight attendant stepped forward and pulled out her phone. She tapped her screen a few times, then turned it toward security. I recorded her behavior on the plane. Here's the footage. The rich woman's face went from red to pale in an instant. You can't, the security officer raised a hand. That will be enough, ma'am. Please come with us. And just like that, it was over. The last thing I saw was her being escorted away, her screams echoing through the terminal. People were watching. Whispering. Smirking. Her perfect, untouchable world had just come crashing down. Once she was gone, the flight attendant turned to me. You good? I let out a breath. Yeah. Thanks for backing me up. She grinned. No problem. That woman was a nightmare. The businessman from the flight walked past, rolling his suitcase. He gave me a thumbs up. Legendary. I laughed. A few minutes later, I was outside, calling an Uber, still processing everything. Then, just as I was about to get in the car, I got a text. It was from an unknown number. You have no idea what you've done. No name. No context. But I knew. Even after all of that, she was still trying to play the game. I blocked the number, got into my Uber, and never thought about her again. Some people think their money or connections make them untouchable. They think they can treat everyone like dirt, throw tantrums, and bully their way through life. But the second they meet someone who doesn't back down, they crumble. And honestly, it was pretty damn satisfying to watch.